Hi everyone just joining. I'll leave it for a couple of minutes as the numbers tick up. I know it takes a little while for everybody to come through, but welcome. I can see the numbers going up. Do feel free to engage with the chat as you join us. Introduce yourself, let us know where you're dialed in from, maybe what the weather's like with you. We've got a bit of variation on the panel. I've got sun, the people have got rain. So do say hello. Okay, just still seeing the numbers come up, so I'll leave it for another couple of minutes. Welcome everybody that's just joined. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Hi Helen, hi from York.
What's the weather doing in York?
Yeah, do let us know what's happening with you. We've had it all, haven't we, in the last week? Snow, sun, winds. Yeah. Okay, I can see the numbers holding steady, so I'll kick off. A huge welcome and a big thank you for joining us today. I know that we're all very busy and it's Easter week, so thank you for coming and sitting in. And of course, a big thank you and welcome to my guests. So we're very lucky to have Helen here today from House of Colour.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And House of Colour have been part of our community for a whopping 25 years, which is amazing, and have reached our gold level. So I'm excited to hear more from you, Helen. And we also have lovely Cath, who's been working with them as our brilliant practitioner. So what we'll be doing today is we'll just dive into explore the impact of maintaining that accreditation for such a long time. And we'll keep it nice and relaxed. We'll have a bit of a chat. We've got some questions, but please do engage with us as well. Any questions or concerns or things that you'd like us to go into in more detail, just pop it in the chat. And I should say, I'm Beth. I'm the People Lead at Investors in People, and I'll be hosting the conversation. So let's dive straight in. I'll start with you, Helen. Could you talk us through maybe your reflections on your first experience of Investors in People? What was that like for you?
It was quite scary, actually. I've got no corporate background or business background. I started my career working within John Lewis just as somebody on the handbag counter and worked my way up into personnel and training, but never had any very senior roles there. And then left and had a career break for 7 years, had my first 2 children, and then started a charity working with people in schools and developed that and worked for that, and then had a 3rd child 11 years later, and knew that I wanted something that would work around a career that would work around him, and came across House of Colour, which is a franchised image consultancy, so looking at personal colour and style and makeup for men and women in people's personal lives and also in their corporate lives, if that's relevant for them. And realised this was going to be a fabulous thing for me to do. I loved it, and I trained and became very successful very quickly, just as one of the rank and file consultants. And that was in 2002 that I started that. In 2008, I had the opportunity to buy the company with 3 of my colleagues from the retiring directors, and had been therefore aware of the Investors in People process as a consultant, and just kind of said what I thought was relevant and did my bit, and didn't really care about it, and that was fine. I was just going to be me, and that was all lovely, that was fine. And then suddenly you buy the company, and then there was Cath on the stage at conference saying, this is a big change and here are the new leaders and this will all be lovely, and that was fine. And then terror of terrors, 3 years later, we had our own assessment that we had to be responsible for, and we've decided to go for gold. The different levels had just been introduced at that point. And I just thought, yep, we're definitely doing this. Gold is what we're going to go for. Let's go for it. But inside, talk about imposter syndrome. I really thought, I have no idea how we're going to tackle this. As I say, no corporate background, so didn't think I'd be able to access the framework. I felt the language would get in the way. It just seemed like, reams and reams of complexity that I wasn't going to be able to relate to. And I was really quite worried about that, because what if we failed? We'd been in place 3 years, but, the legacy that we'd been given of this wonderful accreditation for all these years, and what if we failed and that would be on my shoulders, is how I felt about it. but I'm me, and you just dive in. And that's what you've got to do. You're either sink or swim. So we dived in. And of course, I very quickly realized that actually the framework is accessible. The language is there so that ordinary people like me can understand it and can translate it. And of course, you've got an assessor there. You know, Cath was there, not in any way to hold our hand, but to just go, well, I think that means this. And you go, oh, right, that means that. Okay, let's have a look at what that means for us then. So it was a really big thing for us. We dived in, we collected the evidence, we tried to shuffle about and see where it fitted. And whether we had achieved gold or not, I actually found it an incredibly affirming experience, because it made me stop with my colleagues and look back over the past 3 years and go, wow, we've actually done something here. You know, we've moved forward and we've got a benchmark, we've got a framework to measure it by. And that'll come up later. I think that was important. And I remember distinctly, it was my mother's 80th birthday. I was away with her and my sister at a lovely, beautiful country house hotel down in Devon, when Cath rang and said, you've got gold. So I can remember that distinctly. So it was quite an emotional journey for me, but very affirming and actually very positive. And not only the gold accreditation, but that sense of, oh, you can do this. You don't need to be afraid of the language. So it kind of sorted that one for me, which was great.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. And how about you, Cath? What are your reflections on that time?
Well, my memories go back to when I very first met Lynn Elvey, who was the then owner of House of Colour. And it was a Monday morning, and I drove up the M25, really hot. And when I got to the house where their head office was, Lynn opened the door in this beautiful lemon dress. And I stood there in a grey suit and black shoes and a black handbag. Got inside and we talked for 3 hours. And I was absolutely fascinated by the stories that she was telling me about House of Colour and how it worked and all the rest of it. But all the time I was looking at a mirror that was at the side of me, thinking, I'm sure she's really dying to get her hands on me, you know, because I felt so awful in this grey suit. And I remember coming out and throwing the jacket in the car and phoning my husband and saying, I'm never going to wear that suit again. And he said, I didn't like it anyway. So anyway, after that, of course, I then did the assessment. And what really made me look up was the fact that they were so passionate about making a difference for people. And they were all so enjoying the job that they were doing. And in fact, they said to me, well, if ever you want to give up your job, Cath, come and join us. And at the end of the assessment, I thought, I've got to do something about this. So not giving up my job, but I did go and get my colours done and also my style done. And of course, never, ever wore that grey jacket again. But they've been an amazing company to work with. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think you're a very special organisation. I've always felt that way from the first time I heard about you and the things you were doing. It really does make a difference to people's lives.
We're very, I mean, Cath mentioned it there, there's a huge amount of passion within the business, sometimes more passion than business sense, actually, and we'll perhaps talk about that later, which is interesting. And it's, you know, one of the things that we need to talk about with IOP is the values of the company and whether they're expressed right through. And that bit's just not difficult for us. You know, the values of our company are just absolutely root and branch through all our people. So that's an easy bit for us.
Lovely. And I mean, obviously that was the kind of start of the journey for you both, but what have been some of the milestones along the way on your journey with investors and people?
Well, you know, buying the company and that first gold accreditation, as I described, was important. And I remember celebrating that at a conference. We have an annual company conference, and we themed it, we called it gold. It was our gold conference. And we had gold balloons and we had gold invitations and we had gold flowers and we had gold everything, including gold cupcakes for everybody to take home. And various bottles of fizz were opened. I definitely remember that, lots of celebration, and gold certificates for all the consultants, which they were very proud of, actually. I remember thinking, oh, this is quite a lot of money for all these certificates. Are they going to just stuff them in a drawer? But they've been proudly displayed in their studios for all that time. So that was a good one. I was asked by my colleagues, I said that I bought the company with 3 others. I was asked by my colleagues to step into the MD's role. I think it was 2013, I can never remember. And that felt like another real stretch for me, but it was obviously a landmark moment. I felt it was the right thing to do for me and for the company, and very privileged to have been asked by them. And of course, the IIP framework became incredibly helpful at that point, because somebody else has done the work. This is what my people, our people need. I haven't got to invent that. I've got to look at it and go, oh, hadn't thought about that one. You know, that's a blind spot for me, or, yep, we're really good at that. How can we do more of that? So that was just really, really helpful. You guys, the professionals who've been at it for years, have done that. So that standard was very, very good. And it enabled me to think, you know, what are we lacking here? What is my focus of direction? Another landmark for me, and Cath will remember the journey through this, it certainly didn't happen overnight, as I recognised that I needed to bring on board a CFO. And the guy that we had met and felt would be the right person to do this was, and still is, a man, which in our company, you know, we have one male consultant and everybody else is female. Not by design, that's not what I would choose actually, but that is where we are at the moment for various reasons. So bringing him on board and seeing this incredibly passionate, excited group of female consultants go, what's that all about then? This is different. And of course, he brought a very, very different energy and a very different approach. He helped me move people away from just this passion about what we do to being far more business focused. They suddenly had to report their figures. Horror of horrors. Some people didn't like that very much. And we reconstructed and introduced new contracts which have performance criteria in them. So this was all about the success of the business, which is obviously what we're there to do. But you can imagine it did create a few ruffles and little waves, and having that changed, managed through over the years, so that now everyone accepts not only my financial officer, but also the contracts, and that's just normal, and that we are business focused. And that has actually really helped through this last year when we've been through this pandemic. People have known what they're in it for, actually.
Yes.
So that was an interesting journey, wasn't it, Cath? But ultimately it's about the aims of the business, which is what we're there for.
And one of the interesting things that came out of that was that people felt that the job should have been advertised. But of course, Helen,
which it should.
Directors knew this guy before. And so as part of the assessment, you know, that went into the report.
Yeah. And
that's been a big change, that you do advertise
everything is advertised everywhere now, all over the place, and that's fine. That's good. It's good. It's very good.
And also, of course, they had no idea who he was, and so part of the assessment showed that he really needed to go and visit all the different teams, the franchises, and get to know them. And now they think he's the best thing ever. You know, but it took a time.
Well, he needed to understand our culture.
Yes. Yeah.
And he has.
Yes.
So that's good. It's good.
Yes.
It's a good journey.
You know, I think as a leadership team, when you were put together, you've all got different personalities, but the style of leadership that you actually portrayed was very collaborative. And innovative as well. And I think that's shown through as well with the pandemic that you've just had and all the changes that you've had to make there, that you're not afraid to throw things out and start all over again and bring in brand new ideas. And that's what happened with IIP as well, because a lot of the things that you'd always been doing, all of a sudden, you know, through talking to the consultants and head office, you know, some of the things that weren't working, you were really, really eager to find out what they were. And when I went back, you'd done something that was quite innovative about them, not just change what from my suggestion, but put your own stamp on it. And that's really worked.
Well, one of the things that I don't know, but one of the things I've always felt about the framework for me personally is that it shouldn't be treated as a tick box exercise. It's very tempting to do that because you've got lots of boxes and you've got to tick them. But you know, actually that isn't the value. It's not about getting the plaque at the end and the email, you know, logo. It's not about that. It's about seeing how we're performing. These are our people. Our success is based on these people. You know, it's not me, it's our people, particularly in a franchise, well, in any organization, but certainly in a franchise organization. And so I've always welcomed the bits where we've got it wrong or we're lacking or we haven't thought about it carefully enough, because then you can go, okay, let's get this bit, shake it, what can we do? And innovation does come out of that, and that's almost always better. So I think that's a really important thing about any type of framework, is not to see it as a tick box exercise, but to see it as something that you know, we pay for it. You might as well get the value from that. You get you get an amazing report with all that detail in it and all the statistics in it. It gives you so much information about how you can genuinely make work better for your people and therefore for yourself.
Yes.
You know, ultimately, and meet the aims of the business. So yeah, it's good.
Fantastic. And that's a nice segue into my next question, actually, Helen. And that's kind of around how Investors in People has supported you personally during your career.
Well, you know, as I said, I started off, you know, not knowing anything really, and I'm an adventurer. I jump in and see if I can swim. So as I said, I've already said this. It showed me what our people need. I didn't have to do that work. So that's really, really, really supportive. Just gives you a framework to stand on, a diving board to stand on. I have to say, and this isn't about being nice about Cath. I think it would be the same with anybody. But I've found having an assessor there, and I don't phone Cath every 5 minutes at all. We couple of calls a year perhaps, but having someone there who really understands this framework and sees how it's worked out in lots of different organizations. You know, if I'm struggling with something, I can call her or email her, and she'll say, well, I've got a resource here, why don't you look at that? You know, so that's just been very, very helpful and affirming. I think getting the I've mentioned already, getting that report which tells you what you've done well, so you can go, oh, that was me and that was our regional manager, you know, because as I said earlier, I'm not very good at that. And then of course you can take all those lovely little quotes and you can put them into your marketing and you can use them for your recruitment, and you know, all of that is very, very supportive. And I was talking to Cath yesterday as we were preparing for this, and she didn't mention any names, of course, but she said that some organizations don't even read the report. You know, it's there for you to really to build on. So all of that's just been incredibly supportive personally. It's meant I haven't had to carve out something that I would probably have got very wrong.
And it is so important, isn't it, to take time to celebrate what you've done. I think it can be very tempting, you know, especially over the last year as things have changed so rapidly and there's always been a new challenge to overcome, never to look back and actually think about, you know, what you have done well and those kind of positive bases that you can build from too.
Yes,
that's right. And I think it's one of the things about leadership is that nobody else is going to do that for you. You know, it's all about rewarding and recognizing the people that work with you and for you in the organization, and it's very rare that somebody turns around and says, you know, just need to tell you you've done a really good job. I mean, they do, but not very often. And so having that documented report which actually goes into the detail is a precious thing. And I don't go back and read them all the time, but you know, I can go, yep, we did all right. We can open a bottle of champagne on that one with our heads held high. Yeah.
And I think as a leadership team, you've always kept your sense of humour, which is really
vital.
Very important. And although that you know, it's been a very testing time, you've all pulled together so well over this last year, and because you've got different strengths, they've all come to the fore, haven't they? With one of them doing free coaching sessions on a Saturday, and another one looking at the well-being, and even you know, the regular one-to-ones that you have with your consultants. You rotate because you've each got different personalities,
Yep.
and each of you gets something different, a different insight out of the chats that you have. And that also helps you to get suggestions for continuous improvement that you make.
Totally. I think, I don't know whether Beth wants to talk about this or not, but I think this last year has been extraordinary, obviously, for absolutely everybody. And in House of Colour, we are person-to-person close contact services, basically. So although we're not in the hair or beauty industry, we had to kind of put ourselves in that same slot to know, what was required of us from a COVID infection prevention perspective and everything else. And that's where we've been. So opening up again soon, 12th of April, it should be lovely. But we realized immediately that the business could just go down the pan, and our sales went down 90% overnight, literally a year ago when the pandemic started. So we had that, decision to, what are we going to do about this? And there are 4 of us on our leadership team. We decided that I would take on the pivoting the company, changing the training, we'll talk about that in a minute, that Diana Blakeman would take on the wellbeing czar role, really, for all our people. We didn't know what that was going to be, but goodness, if we needed that, have I needed that, have we all needed that, my colleague, the financial officer, Marcus King, would ensure that the money stayed safe, and he was on that, day one, made sure that the company could stay afloat, negotiating with our suppliers and all the rest of it. And Jackie Perkins, one of our non-exec directors, as Cath said, put on coaching group sessions every Saturday for as long as the lockdown lasted. I don't think she thought it was going to be as long as it was, but actually that, even when we stopped those we call them touch points, we've continued with those weekly touch points right through this year because our people have needed it. They're independent franchisees, not able to make any money on the whole. I talk about what we were able to do, but being able to come together. And actually it's been incredibly moving to see how people have responded to those, and that they've really needed it. You can see in their eyes they've needed that connection with this community that there is within House of Colour. And so there are 2 aspects to our business, really. One is that we train new franchisees. So, we sell them a franchise and the equipment and the training and get them launched. And one is then that the outworking of the services that they offer, the colour and style sessions and the cosmetic offering that we have and other services. And we had at that time 12 franchisees signed up on our books just as we went into lockdown. 8 in the States and 4 over here. And I thought, oh my goodness, what are we going to do with these people? We can't give them their money back and say, oh no, we're not going to play, because they love this and they want this, they really, really want it. So we had to turn the training round overnight, really, into virtual training. And we discovered very quickly that the colour analysis piece that we do cannot be done virtually. It can't be done over Zoom. Lots of our competitors have said, oh yes, we'll do little online something for you, but we nailed our colours to the mast and went, we know we can't do this because we recorded hours of video for training and it doesn't work. So that was interesting, but we discovered we could take the style training online, so we turned that around incredibly quickly. My heads of training here in the UK and the US retrained the whole company, both sides of the ocean, and got them going, and it was fascinating to see those who'd been trained in that way. That's their normal, so that's what they do, and it actually has changed the business model completely for the whole company, and it's one of the very positive things that's come out of it from the pandemic for us. So we're House of Colour. We could get you to come and find out about the best colours for you, and then you'd get very excited about that, and we'd get you back for style. But actually not everybody came back for style, because some people were just, oh, this is so exciting, the colour is so exciting and I can do that for the rest of my life. But if you start with style and you do that virtually, and it can be done in small sessions, you're going to want to know which colours to build that wardrobe in. And so we've discovered that our conversion from colour to style, the number of clients going through all of our services, which is of course what we want, has gone up dramatically, even through this ridiculous time that we've been going. So, you know, out of every terrible thing comes you know, a lovely silver lining, and that's been the one of them for us. But making that decision had to make it very quickly and just get on with it and graft it and pivot the company. And I'm very proud that we've done that.
Yes.
Very proud that we've done that. And I know that, you know, we're not accredited with investors and people in the States, but we've experienced pretty much exponential growth in America through the pandemic year. Who knew? Who knew? Completely
Well, that was the
mad.
thing. 12 months ago, we had no idea, did we, what it would hold? But I think one of the things that stood out to me hearing you kind of talk through that were two things. I guess the sense of connection and community seems like it really supported everybody, but also supported the business. And also it's interesting how you were making those decisions as well. I know you said that you've got different personalities in the leadership team. So how did you sort of balance those two priorities together?
Well, I do naturally have a very collaborative style of leadership, and my Marcus King, my CFO, always says, you're very collaborative, Helen. And what he's really saying is, just tell me what to do. It's your job. But as I've grown older, I recognise that's because I'm very extrovert. So actually, I don't know what I think unless I'm talking to somebody. So it serves me to collaborate, and I just value what other people think. Some of them may not be valuable, but I do value hearing what everyone says because it's not the same as mine. So I will always collaborate, and we do a lot of that. We use our regional managers to talk with our teams of people, and then that comes back up to the leadership team. And as you said, we have very, very different personalities and gifts and talents in our leadership team. You know, I think many people would think it's not a match made in heaven, but we have made that work because we recognise that we need all the differences and the strengths and weaknesses that we bring, and we have great accommodation of each other's weaknesses. Actually, we laugh a lot about those. We really do, and that's good. So we will collaborate and we'll talk about it, but ultimately I'm not afraid to make a decision, and that's my job, and I will do that. And when I make it, people know. So that's good. And I think it is that balance. You have to have both. And I think the pandemic really showed us that you can't in leadership sit about and wait and see what happens. Not if you own your own business, you can't. So knowing when to just go for it, do it. And I've always said that I'm not afraid to make decisions. If I make the wrong decision, that's fine. I'll own it, and we can change that.
Yes.
You know, you can change it, but it's not helpful, certainly when the chips are down as they have been, and people's livelihoods have been threatened as they have been in this last year, to just sit on the fence and say, oh, we'll see what happens. People need leadership. I think that's one of the things, I mean, you know, everyone says that and you know that, but I think we've really seen that brought into sharp focus through this pandemic. Our franchisees have wanted to know what they should do and what they shouldn't do, and of course some of that has been you know, practically around the guidance that the government has given, and I tell you, some of that has been interesting to navigate and interpret and find out, and you know, but there has to be very clear, do this, don't do this communication, and hearing people's feedback as that is given. So yeah, it's been a very interesting balance, Beth, for me. But the collaboration can't go away. You have to hear what your people have to say.
It's interesting to hear your reflections, because one of the statistics that I've seen come out is that this year there's been some shifts in how people perceive information as trustworthy. And for the first time, people now trust information they get through their workplace more than from, say, governments or any other source. So that definitely fits with what you're saying. It's so important to have that clarity when you're communicating in times of change. It sounds like, you know, you kind of hit that spot on this year.
Well, you know, wading through, and I have, I'm not being political here at all, but I have huge sympathy for anybody in government in any kind of crisis. I mean, every day everything was different, and what everybody was dealing with was different. So all the government guidelines are actually very generic when you get down to a nitty gritty. You know, are we allowed to use our drapes on a person? You know, we use drapes around people's necks. Is that then contaminated? Do we have to consider that? How long can we not use those for on somebody else? You know, is steam cleaning them okay or isn't it? You know, all of that stuff, so down to the nitty gritty. What temperature should you wash something at? How long must you alcohol wipes? You know, right down to that level. When you're dealing with people in close contact services, and if you take it seriously, which of course we have, you have a huge amount of interpretation and clarity that you have to bring, and you're making it up as you go along. You know, you're doing your absolute best, doing the research as you can, but that's all on top of your day job. You know, so
yeah, it's been huge this year. And how about you, Cath, working across different organisations? What reflections do you have on the last year?
Well, it's been a very interesting year because it's the first time that I've really used Zoom and you know, all these other different ways of communicating. And what I found is that it's well, it saved a lot of travel for me, you know, and also people have taken to it very easily. That assessments have gone ahead, and where we've had 2 or 3 people together, it's still worked. So I can imagine that this is going to be the norm, or perhaps blended a bit with going to visit, because I still like to go in and see the you know, the people within their organization. But I think that doing it online has been a God save for everybody. And as I say, I think it's going to be the norm an awful lot more now.
I have to say, I agree with you. Actually, before the pandemic, I was one of those people that was a bit allergic to working from home. I really liked being in an office and around people and, you know, feeling the buzz. That's what got me going. But, you know, having reflected on the last year working from home, obviously within the context of the pandemic. So, but it's given me so much more flexibility. I think it's been better for some of the areas of my work which require, you know, dedicated focus, less interruptions. So probably not going anywhere anytime soon, I don't think.
I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting because it does depend, I think, hugely on the individual. You know, the introverts are going to love it. Apps don't make me go back into an office for all the reasons that you said, and the extroverts can't function without it. So I think it is going to be a blended approach going forward. One of using Zoom, as you said, Cath, you know, everyone had to get expert within House of Colour instantly, which some of it happened, some of it didn't, but we've got there now, which is good. And we always have, as I said earlier, our annual conference, and we hold that in person, great celebration in a hotel, and, you know, it's lovely. And obviously that couldn't go ahead. And I really thought, is it going to be worth doing this over Zoom? You know, by October, we'd all got to the point we were a little bit tired of everything. And there is a fatigue, isn't there, of being on screen. But we did it. We did 2 4-hour days, consecutive days. And everybody, without exception, said it had been far better than they thought it was going to be, and it was very valuable to them and served a sense of connection. And there was able to be training and innovation and all the things that we would, sharing of best practice that we would normally do. And of course, it then enabled us, at just the beginning of March, we decided to hold another mini conference, which didn't have all the expense and organisational, you know, stuff that we had to do beforehand, but we were able to put on another one to help our people. It was really a well-being conference to help them to focus on the research that's been done in the last months about why people are finding it so difficult. So we looked at research about people's oxytocin levels because they hadn't been in social contact with each other, and also research that's been done by psychologists around people's behaviours, and that we've been behaving like people who've been in captivity for a long time. So really it was just sharing some of that research with people and helping our people understand it's okay, we're all going through this together, this is normal. How can we get ready to open on the 12th of April.
Yes.
That was really hard. It's no good going, oh, I'm out now, because you're so low and inactive in many ways with small horizons. So we've got that going. So hopefully 12th of April, people will be ready to go.
Exciting week next week.
Yes, indeed. Very exciting week.
And a lot of people will have got into different routines, working from home as well, going for a walk at lunchtime or different activities. And, to just go back into an office and to give all that up is going to be really difficult, I think, for people.
It'll be very interesting as we go through the rest of this year, I think, in the workplace. Lots of challenges.
I think one of the strengths that as a leadership team that you've all had is compassion, though. You've all been very aware of individuals' personalities, their needs and everything else. And that's part of your values, and you really stuck to that throughout all of the time that you've been involved.
As we went into this, my husband and I, we live just the two of us. We've got adult children, and we have a house big enough for us both to have a separate office and all the rest of it. But our, thinking of all of those working men and women who were homeschooling off the kitchen table. I mean, and it's been so prevalent. And we had two girls in our office, both of whom were in that situation. And we just asked them, do you want to be furloughed? This is not necessarily what the business needs actually, but it is what you as an individual. They were going off their heads, and so we made that decision, and it was the right thing. And that was quite difficult actually for the rest of the office team to deal with. I remember people saying, "That's not fair." Either we're all off on holiday, or none of us. And I thought, it's not quite like that. So we worked that one through, and it was fine. But it really important that you do what you can to keep people sane in times like this, and to work with their situation. So yeah, lots of challenges.
Thank you. So I'm conscious of time, and I want to make sure we've got a decent slot at the end to deal with any Q&As. But before we go to the question and answer section, I just wanted to ask Helen what your reflections are over your career and what advice you might have for aspiring leaders coming through.
Thank you. I will answer that question. I've got the head office telephone ringing in my ear. I hope you can't hear it, but I certainly can. I imagine either somebody will answer it or they'll realise that I'm not answering my extension. It stopped. Good. So reflections on last year. Don't put your headset on. I think that's the first one. So reflections over the career. I just feel incredibly privileged to have come across the organisation and been able to have opportunities. I do believe we make our own luck and our opportunities, and you do need to jump into them when they're offered. So I think that's been a sort of life lesson. I think for those aspiring to leadership, listen to your people, and one of my personal values, and people often go, really, is humility, actually. And what I mean by that is I might not be right. I might be really right, and you might need to know what I've got to say here, but I might not be. So let's just listen and see what somebody else's perspective brings, because everybody can teach you something. So listening, I think, is really important. Making decisions, as we've talked about, don't be afraid to do that, but make them compassionately so that they are the right decisions. And I think to understand that leadership is a great responsibility and privilege, actually, and we need to hold that very, very close to our hearts. I always see leadership this way up. I think very often when you draw an organizational leadership structure, there she is at the top, he is at the top, that's the chairperson or the CEO or whatever, and it goes all the way down. And that's never made any sense to me at all, because if you're going to carry the responsibility and the weight of all of these people and their needs and the aims for success of the organization, whatever that may be, for me, I need the ground, the earth behind me. I need to be firmly rooted in something. So I always see it like that. So I always see that my job as a leader is to support those who, it's a bit like a tree, I suppose, isn't it? That's where the fruit is, up here. And I've personally found that a very helpful way of thinking about leadership. There is no place for throwing around your weight. Making decisions and doing it powerfully is one thing, but doing it compassionately is another. I think that's what I'd say, Beth.
Thank you, Helen. It's great advice. I think you're a huge inspiration. It's been lovely to hear your reflections and those great tips. Was there anything, Cath, that you wanted to add to that? Maybe reflections over your career too? Over
my career? Well, I've been working with Investors in People ever since it came out. I won't tell you how many years ago that is. No doubt you know, Beth, how long it's been out. And I must say that no, it's been a privilege for me to go in as a practitioner, because you see warts and all what's going on with it within an organisation. And I feel very privileged that people do open up and, you know, talk to me as freely as they do. And I get a tremendous motivation out of seeing changes that are made as a result of the assessments. Not me being clever, but the fact that, you know, I've been talking to their staff on a one-to-one basis and gleaned different insights that perhaps haven't come to fruition before, but have been able to then feed that back to the leadership team. And when you get a leadership team like in House of Colour that really take it so seriously, you know, it's amazing, you know, when you go back and you see something that's been put in place, but to see the impact that it's made. And, you know, I've always valued Investors in People as a route to change for organisations, but it's down to them whether they're going to take it on board. But the majority do, and I think it's amazing, absolutely amazing. I love it.
Oh, fantastic! That's warmed my cockles.
Good.
Lovely. So I'll now open up to everybody that's listening in. Throw all your questions at us. Let's see how many we can get through. While you're doing that, what I'll do is just go to the first one that I've seen come through from Julia Sullivan. Thank you, Julia. And this one's addressed to Helen. And the question is, how do you go about deciding whether you're ready to go to Investors in People or not?
Right, well, I don't actually know because I didn't do that. That was my predecessors who did that. You're going to have to help me here, Cath, but I think I would talk. There must be somebody you can talk to. I don't know whether it's an assessor or whether it's you, Beth. There must be somebody who goes, this is the framework, this is how it works. And I think I would talk to Investors in People and get a sense of, is this right for us? Because it's no good, as I said earlier, it's not about ticking a box. It's about, is this going to help drive forward the organisation that you're in, Julia? So that's not a very good answer, but I think you've just got to find out. And it depends, obviously, on your organisational structure and what you're charged with doing and whether your job's on the line if you don't get it and all of that. But I would be talking to your you know, your HR people or your leadership team, whoever it is that's responsible for making the decision whether you should go, and saying, you know, why do you want to do this? What is my role in this? And if you're that leader, then is it going to help drive forward the aims and ambitions of the organisation?
Yes, I think just to add to that, very often people look on Investors in People as an HR initiative. And I think, you know, how it's happened within House of Colour, where all the leadership team have been involved in it, and then that's been trickled down to everybody else. It has to be, you know, for the whole company, not just something that in HR you've got that as one of your targets to do. Everybody has to be involved in it.
Absolutely. And I'll just chip in with my last penny's worth on that one. I suppose it's also about how you use the journey in the process. I think sometimes there's a danger that people think it's a sort of pass or fail exercise, or a tick box, like you said, Helen, when actually every organisation is always in sort of different places in terms of growth and improvement. There's always opportunities. So I think maybe if you sort of shift to that viewpoint, it becomes a tool to help you improve. In which case, you know, is there ever not a good time to do that, I guess?
It's a journey, isn't it?
It is.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Just looking out to see if any have come through. Please don't be shy. Even if there's something that we've touched on, maybe that you'd like us to expand a bit further. I think one of the areas for me, and anybody that's listened to me on anything will know it's my passion, is around well-being. Particularly over the last year, I think we've all experienced, you know, face to face our kind of physical and mental health and the concerns that can come with that. So do you have any further advice, Helen or Cath, on different things organisations can do to support well-being?
Well, I think it's interesting because I remember when I first began to sort of think about well-being, which is a few years ago now, and going to one of your meetings, Cath, regional meetings, and thinking, well, this is all quite new, and people talking about fruit in the office, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, and actually we've moved so far from that in terms of our. I mean, I know that wasn't the whole thing then, but I'm thinking, oh, should I be doing that? But again, it's really, really about listening to your people, and this year has shown us how actually individual people's needs change very quickly, very quickly. And as an employer, you need to understand that and work about what is going to work for that individual. So again, it's about listening. It's about being compassionate, and we haven't cut people slack in terms of their performance, but if they've needed time off, we've just said that's fine. We really have. We haven't counted the days for our HQ staff. We've all looked at what needs to be done on an individual basis. If people have needed to walk in the middle of the day for longer than an hour, that's fine. That and one of the things I thought was very interesting this year, and it'll be interesting to see what the research shakes out to show, but I think as we went into the pandemic, working from home was not a thing because basically employers didn't trust their people, actually. And that has changed. I think that was probably true for us, actually. Weren't aware of that, but I think that was probably true. They needed to be in and they needed to go home, and that's completely changed. We've closed our head office function apart from the dispatch part entirely for a year. And we've had excellent performance out of our people, and they've worked at whatever time they needed to work, and we've enjoyed that and worked with that. So there's far more flexibility, certainly in our organisation, around our workplace, and I think that will continue, and that has boosted people's well-being, definitely.
Yes. And showing that you trust them to use their time and to do what they need to do, but in their own time.
I would never have said that we didn't trust our people.
No.
But we had a culture of you turn up and you go home.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's changed. Yeah. That's good.
That's good. Massive. And I think the thing that's occurred to me this year is that, perhaps some of the dialogue around mental health can be at the quite sort of extreme intervention end. But actually, if you put mental health on a parity with physical health, and you start viewing the things that you can do as more like, be equivalent to having a personal trainer or having a healthy diet so that you feel better rather than treating something further down the line, that can make a huge difference. Thank you. Great advice there. And I've seen a really interesting question come through from Sue. So she said that they have their annual meeting tomorrow and she's presenting going forward for investors in people. And she's looking for any tips or advice on how to convince the leadership team to go through with that.
I don't know what sort of organisation this is, so it depends on your leadership team, I suspect. I do think, I know it sounds silly, and this is a very generic thing, or I probably shouldn't say it sounds silly, but I was thinking about Invest in People's tagline, making work better. If it's better for everybody, it's better for the organisation. And some people go to work because they want to get out of the house and they enjoy and they want mental stimulation. Some people go because they absolutely just have to pay the bills, and everything in between. And so if you can get that across in some way, so to your leadership team, that this is about the whole organization having a better experience, you will inevitably get better results, there's no question. But I don't know what the organization is, or the structure, so but it's very overarching, but that's the truth. It does make work better for everyone.
Yes, and engagement, if you can get true engagement of all your people, it's going to influence your performance as well. So the two go hand in hand together. So if you can make people happy at work, motivated, then you're going to improve the business. So it's got a financial outcome as well as just being a nice thing to do. It's, well, if we don't do it, it's really worth looking at, what are some of the areas that you really want to improve on, and how can we do it, through our people and through making life better for our people.
Absolutely, great advice there. And Sue, of course, if you want to connect with anybody after this, I'm sure we'd all be happy to talk through. I guess one of the things that I use sometimes if I'm sort of building cases around particularly well-being is I try and use basically communication that works across 3 areas. So some people like to hear statistics. So maybe there's some stats around how engagement can lead to improved performance that will work on somebody who's kind of numbers orientated. Storytelling, for people that are kind of invested in that side of things a little bit more, that kind of qualitative anecdotal story can make a big difference. And the last area that I try and cover is shared problems. So like you were saying, Cath, if there's a particular challenge in the business, maybe it's turnover, it could be absence rates, or it could just be, maybe you have trouble getting ideas floating up. If you can kind of draw on that as the starting point and providing this as the potential solution or a path forward, that could be effective. But I look forward to hearing how it goes.
Yes.
Yes, good luck.
Lovely. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. I can't see any more that have come through. And I know it's always a gift when you get time back, especially when it's coming up to the end of an hour. It gives you time to have a snack maybe before the next meeting. So I'll pause here. I'll ask you both if you've got any further reflections you wanted to add, any last minute questions that come through. Otherwise, we'll close off here.
I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity to share our journey.
Yes, and thank you, Helen, for letting me share your journey as well. Because I learn something, every day I learn something when I'm working with clients. And the nice thing is that you can then share it and move it on to somebody else. So, it's been a real privilege working with you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll finish off by saying thank you to you both for being so lovely. It's been a very enjoyable hour. It's flown. And I hope everyone that's been listening in has found this helpful too.
Indeed. And if anybody wants, to be put in contact with me if there's anything I've said that you want to talk through, perfectly happy to do that, of course.
Yes, and me as well, of course.
Me. Thanks, everyone. Have a great end to the week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks
everybody,
so
and thank you for your time. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.